I'm making a hydromel, which is actually mead. Yep, mead. Hi, I'm Brian, and you're watching City Steading. If you want to learn to grow and brew and take control of your food, hit the subscribe button below and click the bell icon. That way you'll know every time we do something. Today, I'm making a hydromel, which is actually mead. Yep, mead. But it's hydromel. It's a lighter mead. Before you go run off and watch one of those videos where they're making some 20% mead monster, let me remind you of one thing. The lower the alcohol content of your mead, the faster you can enjoy it. And I don't mean drink it down. I mean the faster till it's good to drink. This I'm expecting to be really good to drink in about 4 to 6 weeks. And for all you naysayers out there, there is a meadery called Groenfell Meadery. I'll probably put a link to them in our description. They make craft meads, 4 to 5%. They carbonate them, and they are from honey to can in 5 weeks. And from what I hear, they're really good stuff. So anybody that says you have to wait a year to drink mead, for certain kinds, yes, they're right, but not every kind. I'm making one today that you can make really simply, really efficiently, and be ready to drink it in under 2 months. Kind of awesome, right? Now, along the way, you've probably figured out, back that up. What's mead? I'm taking for granted that everybody knows what mead is. Mead is honey wine. Okay, it's an alcoholic beverage, a wine technically made from honey, and they range from all different kinds of things. It is, contrary to what some people have asked me or said in our comments, beer is not the oldest alcoholic beverage. Mead is, and here's why. I think. Today, I'm going to show you how to make a really simple hydromel. Now, it's going to come out to be somewhere in the range of 6 to 9% alcohol, so it's not going to be super, super heavy, but it should ferment out pretty quick, it should clear out pretty quick, and it should taste really, really good quickly. Notice the quickly. That's why you make hydromels. Not every mead that the Vikings drank knocked them on their butt every time they took a sip. Most of the stuff that they drank was lighter, just like beers. It was a lot lighter so that you could drink more of it in a day without getting drunk. They didn't really want to be drunk when they're, going on Viking raids and stuff. But anyway, so the first thing we're going to do, I have here some golden raisins, and I'm going to weigh them because people have been asking for the recipes, and I'm not a recipe kind of guy. I tend to just say, a little bit of that until I get it right. But because people are asking for the recipes and I want you guys to be able to do this, I'm going to give you exact amounts. These are golden raisins. They look pretty good. I don't know if you can see that. They're just raisins. They're good. I'm going to use, they say like 25 raisins. Well, I might go a little bit more. I'm using 1 ounce. It just hit 1 ounce. 1 ounce of golden raisins. So, there you go. 1 ounce of golden raisins into the carboy. Now, I'm making a 1 gallon batch here today. So this is obviously a 1 gallon carboy. By the way, raisins into a funnel, it doesn't really work all that well. You just gotta squish them in there, push them down. I think somebody's stuck. Violence is the answer right there. And just shove it in. There we go. All gone. Good. The next ingredient is the honey. Now, for this recipe, I'm using 1.5 pounds of honey. That actually just happens to be 2 cups. It's slightly over 2 cups. But it's 1.5 pounds. Now, that's important because the honey is a fermentable. That is the sugar that the yeast is going to eat to be able to make it into mead. Okay? Without the honey, no mead. What are the raisins for? Somebody's going to ask, and I figure I might as well tell you. They're the nutrient, because honey doesn't have everything that the yeast need, but there's a little bit of nutrient in those raisins. It's not a lot. Some people make a big deal. It's not a lot. They also have grape skins. Grape skins add tannins, which adds body, a little bit of an astringency to that mead. So they are a nice addition, whether they add a lot of nutrient or not. The raisins are something I didn't always use. I have made mead before without them, and we just finished off a bottle of mead that I made. It was the first mead I'd ever made, and it was It was watery. I really didn't enjoy it. And that gave me the idea that if I'm going to do this again, let's go with a little bit more of a traditional method. The raisins are actually a really traditional method. They've been doing that for thousands of years. So I thought, let's go with that. You know, they pretty much know mead, so let's do that. So all we need to do now is just assemble everything. The rest of it's really simple. It's mechanical rather than thinking or anything like that. So I want to get the honey into here. Now, I didn't heat up the honey, and I didn't do it on purpose because I wanted to show you just how complicated this can be and some methods to fix it. But basically, let's use a funnel. Now this funnel's been sanitized, even though I know it looks like I just changed the oil of my car with it. It's just black. It's okay. Just going to pour the honey right in. And one method that I'm going to use to make the honey get in there easier is I'm only going to put a little bit of water in at first instead of putting all the water in. Then I don't have to shake the whole thing. I'm also going to put some water in here and use a spatula. Honey's sticky and thick and slow. It's like molasses, sort of. So it takes a while to get it all in there, but it's worth it, trust me. I'm gonna cheat. Because I did actually measure this out. It is exactly 1.5 pounds. So I don't want to waste any. And this is actually a really good honey. This is a wildflower honey that it says right on it. We bought it at Whole Foods. So, you know, it's going to be one of those organic, very healthy types of things. And it says right on it that it's Florida. It's a Florida company. Like, they're not even far from us, really, that does this honey. Wow, it is really sticky in there. And I tasted just a little bit of it. It's really good. The orange blossom that I used to make the Viking's blood was good, but it was orange blossom, so that has a strong flavor. And we actually said, even in the tasting, that you can really taste it. I didn't want to have orange flavor in this one. I wanted it to be more of a neutral mead. It'll be raisiny, maybe. Again, just getting it all out. So at this point, we have mead and raisins. Start dumping in water. Now this is Florida spring water, if you can believe that it really came from a spring. I like to use local ingredients if possible. Water, water is important. You know, there's only 3 ingredients in this. So the water that you use is important. People say don't use RO water, reverse osmosis water, because all the minerals have been removed from it, so it tends to suck minerals back in. I've used it, didn't really have a problem, but I'll avoid using it. It seems like a good tip, and it makes sense. We do have an RO system in our house, but we also just have a chlorine and sediment removal system, because St. Petersburg, Florida water sucks, as I've probably said before. So we just remove the chlorine from it, and then it's perfectly fine to use for fermenting with. I actually tasted it when we first got the RO system versus the filtration, and there wasn't a big difference in flavor to me. So I don't have a problem using it. Okay, I'm at that point now. Got it all in there. Well, half of it in there. And you can totally see the honey versus water at the bottom there. And I'm just going to cover it up and start shaking it a little more safely than that. I have honey all over my fingers now. I don't like my fingers being sticky. One sec. So I put the stopper in. The reason I do that is because my thumb isn't big enough to cover the hole. So that way I can just cover that little hole there. And then start shaking. And this works well because I'm also getting oxygen into the mix, which is important for the first day. Some people like to degas right away and they're adding oxygen and all this during fermentation. You could. Maybe it's better. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that, when the Vikings made it in a big vat in their kitchen, they probably didn't mess with it all too much. It just sat there and did its thing. And as you can see, it's starting to really dissolve. This is working. And it's not as much of a workout. So if you want more of a workout, put more water in. But I needed to have some amount of solution here. A lot of meads are made with much, much more honey than this. That's what makes this an interesting mead and a light mead. There's such a thing called a sack mead, which, if you know wine, you know sack wine is an old kind of wine. Similar idea. They're stronger. They're a higher alcohol content than your typical wine. And, sack mead is your typical, stronger than your typical mead. Whereas a hydromel is a lighter one. Let me catch my breath. Kidding, wasn't that bad. Get the stopper back up. Resume the water. Now, I'm using bottled water just because we had these around from a few weeks ago when we were supposed to go on a trip, and Publix had them on sale. Normally, I just use water right from the tap because, as I said, it's filtered. If your tap water tastes horrible, don't use it. Looks like I'm going to need even more. Something I haven't mentioned yet, but something that I always do when I'm getting ready to do a brew. The first thing I do is I take a little bit of water, and you can use a little bit of honey water. You can use a little bit of apple juice if you're making cider. You can use a little bit of whatever must you're working with. Now, if I do this before I start the brew, I don't have any must to work with, so that's why I use water. Sometimes I put a little sugar in it. This time I didn't. I just used water, and I put my yeast in there. Now, I happen to be using Lallemand Danstar Belsazon yeast, and you might recognize that from the last couple of videos I did. The reason why I'm using it is because it was open. They don't last real long once you open them, and I don't like wasting stuff, so I use the rest of the package. I generally, for ciders, only use like half a teaspoon for a gallon. For a mead, they're a little harder to get going, so I like to do a little bit more. I'd say there was probably a teaspoon of yeast in there. Maybe, not quite a teaspoon. Pardon me while I grab a couple waters. And we're going to add more water. I'm going to put the yeast in last, and I'm actually going to take a reading once we get the yeast in there and mixed all through good. You want to leave a little bit of headroom here. About like that, so that seems about. It's okay. Sometimes they will overflow if you get a very aggressive fermentation. We had it happen with wine. I got greedy. Made too much. Put too much in the thing. So this is just yeast and water, and all you're doing is rehydrating. You can actually just dump the yeast right in there if you're using a dry yeast or even a liquid yeast. Just dump it right in. It's better to hydrate it because that way you know if your yeast is good. It doesn't really start foaming up like crazy, but it will give some bubbles off so you know, okay, it's alive, it's active. If it does absolutely nothing in like half an hour, your yeast is probably dead, which is probably good to find out before you put it in here, and then you wait 3 days to find out your yeast is dead. Now, if that happens, it's okay. All you gotta do is put more yeast in. No big deal. So I want to mix this up again, make sure it's homogenous, and get some more oxygen in there. But that looks pretty good to me. That's mixed up. So, somebody said in the comments that you don't need the tube in order to use a hydrometer. Well, I got news for you. If I drop my hydrometer in there, it's probably going to be in there so far I can't reach it, which kind of defeats the purpose. I won't be able to read it. I won't be able to get it back out. Doesn't really do any good. So what I'm going to use is a wine thief. I have this nice glass fancy one here that's far too small for this tube. So you get to watch me fiddle with it for a while and get these out of the way. We didn't need all that water. And all I'm going to do is get it in there as far as I can, put my thumb on it, and fill some up. As you can see, this may take some time. You could use an auto siphon for this. However, I made a mess the last time I tried to do that. So instead, I just make it take a little longer. And this makes me feel kind of like a mad scientist. I may need a lab coat. Derica said that this morning. Totally stole that joke from her. So here we are. To those of you wondering why I'm doing this, let me explain. What I'm actually doing is I'm going to measure the sugars or fermentables in this must. This is now a must, just like when you make wine, because technically this is a wine. This is a honey wine. And what we do is we get this into the tube and we have a hydrometer. Now, a hydrometer is a measuring instrument. Some of them have 3 scales on them. This is a really, really inexpensive one. It actually came with a beer kit. And they're not super, super accurate, but they're accurate enough to give you a good idea. Okay, you can get super minuscule grade one, like they have micro, yeah, words. They have a much different gradient scale, so they can give you much more accurate results down to like the points of a percentage. I don't really find that to be all that necessary. I'm a home brewer. 13.2 versus 13.376, I don't really care. 13.4 is good enough for me. I'm probably a little bit off in my measurement anyway, so it doesn't really matter. What you want to do is drop it in, make sure there's no bubbles, make sure you don't overflow, because I do that all the time too. Give it a little bit of a twist back and forth so that there's nothing on it, and it'll float, because there's some weight in there, and what it does is it floats to the level that tells you relative to neutral water how dense this liquid is, okay? And they're kind of crazy to try to read sometimes. I was expecting this to be somewhere around 1.069 based on 46 points per pound of honey, 1.5 pounds, that's 69, there we go. And it actually came out to, if it would stop moving around, you want to read it below the meniscus of the fluid. In other words, fluid kind of goes up to it. You want to get right at the level. It is actually 1.058. So it's a little bit lower than I expected. This will probably come out to, I don't know, somewhere in the 7 to 8% for alcohol range, which I'm perfectly fine with that. Let me just get my funnel back, dump this right back in. And there we go. Now everything was sanitized. That's why you can do that. Some people don't sanitize their tube, and then you don't want to use that. You want to just get rid of it, because if you introduce any extra bacteria at this point, it could ruin the batch. Now, this is a very important thing that I'm going to say. Use an airlock. I see so many people talking about using balloons and putting a balloon in there and all that. Somebody actually said, oh, just put a cap on there halfway. You can. You can. The probability of something going wrong is pretty slim. But if it did, this is $2. I say it all the time. It's $2. I've used this a lot, many times over. That $2, I could have probably gone through 4 bags of balloons. In the amount of use that this has gotten. And I totally just need to move this and put it in separately. And then you jam that down in there. Now, over time, you'll see the air go down and it'll start bubbling up. That's how you know that this is working. It should take probably 6 to 24 hours before that happens. If after 2 or 3 days you still don't see any activity, you don't see any little bubbles coming up the side, add a little bit more yeast. Put like another quarter of a teaspoon in there. Otherwise, it should be fine. Give this a while. Mead takes time. It's not like a cider that you can do in a week or two, or a wine that can be done in sometimes 10 days, or a beer, 3-4 days sometimes. This is going to be 2 weeks to 4 weeks before it's ready to be racked. That's the next video. So, that's all I got for you for today. If you like this video, give us a like. Alright guys, I'm going to go put this somewhere cold and dark for about the next 2 to 4 weeks, and then I'll pull it out and give you guys a taste of what, well, not a taste, but I'll give you a show of what it looks like, and we'll rack it off those leaves. In the meantime, take care, have a great day.
Hey everybody, if you want to learn to grow and brew and take control of your food, don't forget to hit the subscribe icon down below and hit the little bell next to it. That way you get notified of everything we do.